We'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, as we are honoured to have the opportunity to record this for you today. We acknowledge the traditional countries of the Dja Dja Wurrung and the Wadda Wurrung peoples. We pay respect to their ancestors, elders past and present, along with today's descendants that carry on the living culture and ensure its survival for future generations.
Welcome creatives to a short but thorough lecture on how to maximise your creativity and get paid for your art. Over the past 7 years, I've been researching and experimenting with methods in the creative process, particularly in my field of passion, techno and electronic dance music. Throughout this time, I've researched consistent qualities, both that I've experienced firsthand and through peers and inspirations that can help maximise our creativity when the sparks of inspiration strike, and also how to develop professional tendencies so you can go from a hobby DJ or a bedroom producer to an international touring artist. Here are 7 key areas of my research for which we will explore today. However, the detail we could go into for each of these could all each be their own presentations. However, with respect to your time, I'll try to be as efficient and insightful as possible. Note that areas of research can be applied across all creative fields and media disciplines. However, as electronic music and studio production is my area of expertise, that will be the common examples used. Yet you will see some familiar faces that are professionals in the entertainment and creative industries.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this moment.
Music analysis and inspiration. In my creative research project, I've researched qualities into successful music producers to answer research questions about careers in the creative industries. By examining those that inspire us, we will investigate what elements contribute to successful electronic music production. Some questions from this we'll explore on is how is the value of collaboration, the happiness in creativity, the concept of flow and the flow state, revenue streams for producers. We'll also have a couple of templates with some Ableton tips that are a little bit more of the production side of it rather than the technical side of it, I should say. And let's start with the analysis and inspiration. Why are you here? So this is a little bit about you, and there'll be a few times throughout where we do reflect, but I guess the purpose of this is just to set the intention. Why are you here? What motivated you to be a part of this today? My aim for this is basically for you to think introspectively and reflect on your process throughout and how the areas that I'm discussing may apply to your current projects or ideas that you can perhaps put into practice. I also ask your motivation for being here and what you would like to get out of the next 30 to 45 minutes. So if you'd like to take notes, take some notes. But it could be for one of many different ideas that I know that I've used before and have seen from my colleagues, and that is to spark creativity in the music industry. You may wish to improve as an artist, expand your knowledge of the creative process, learn more about collaboration or revenue streams, streamline your productive process. At the end of the day, there's no wrong answers. My brain's a sponge, I'm sure yours is too. But 2 things that I would definitely recommend is please take notes, and if you have any questions, please ask questions, but most of all, write it down. Now, I know most of us are here because we have a passion for electronic music, but let's hear it from someone who is actually at the top of the table when it comes to the music industry.
The hardest part about getting in the music business is getting in the music business. I wish I had enough job opportunities for every intern that has worked for us for free. But this is the thing. I always tell all the college interns, just find a job. It may not be in a label, it may be in management, it may be in tech company, it might be for a booking agent. Just get a job and start to learn and become the best at that. And then you can start to pivot over and find other opportunities, because it's so hard to find a job in the music business, because I think, like I said, I'm 288. I think the next biggest record company is like $150. There's not like there's millions of jobs, but there's all these independent labels that are out there, you know, that are also starting. And I think you just have to find a job, get in, but be the best at that. Don't just jump ship, 3 months in and think you're an expert. Like, really learn that craft, learn that side of the business, and then you can apply for another job.
So let's begin with what is an artist in the 21st century? Because there are many facets to becoming a successful artist or musician that goes beyond the creative element. In the 21st century, quality in music includes many key traits possessed by elite artists. In addition to musical talent, this includes the ability to collaborate both creatively and professionally, incorporating business acumen and awareness of industry trends, both past and present and emerging, and awareness of one's personal brand whilst developing their sound and audience engagement. A successful artist in the 21st century establishes a solid online presence that engages audiences through consistent releases as well as behind-the-scenes story content on social media that makes them endearing and relatable to their fans. On his Tetragrammaton podcast this past May, Rick Rubin asked Julie Greenwald, who we saw a moment ago, really, how important is social media these days? And her answer, it's the most important thing. Why? Because that's where the content is consumed in the short form content, more important than streaming or Spotify. In addition to this, the modern artist also establishes multiple revenue streams so a passive income can be maintained. We shall look more into these different business revenue streams a little bit later on, but they include things like the ability to tour, royalties, collaborations, merchandise, subscribers, but most importantly, an artist in the 21st century is committed to their craft.
Dave Letterman, I have to say, I told him I'm writing this pilot for NBC. It was one of his year-end Christmas parties or something. Mm-hmm. He said, just make sure you fail doing exactly what you want to do. He told me that. And that's the best advice you can give someone going in a big, scary project. Make sure you fail doing it exactly the way you want it. Because that you can live with.
Yes.
That you can live with. When it's someone else's idea that kills you, that's hard to live with.
Yeah, you'll be homicidal.
Now, moving on from that being committed and doing something that you love, we look at what is happiness in creativity. Aristotle accepts the general belief that happiness or human welfare is the first principle of the practical sciences. Therefore, a running theme that we like to look at throughout our creative journey is what is our inspiration, and having awareness of ourself and pre-established aspirations and acknowledging the steps on the way to our end goal, that the journey itself is our reward over the destination, and that the experience itself in pursuing the passion should be enjoyed, including the challenges that appear along the way. A metaphor for this is Super Mario Brothers or any video game where you have to get the coins, to eat the mushrooms, to slay the dragons, to get the princess. It's all part of the journey towards the common goal. As creators, we produce our art for many different reasons. Tying that into our inspiration and our happiness, here is Rick Rubin explaining why we create and the importance.
It doesn't really matter why, as long as it does the thing that you want it to do, whatever that is. The only advice I would have would be to not listen to anyone and to do what you love and to make things that you love, whatever it is. Make your favorite things. Be the audience. Make the thing for you the audience.
So keeping that in mind as a running theme throughout this presentation, that you are the audience and that you create for you, and you want to be creating for you as the audience, because you want to be happy through your creative endeavors. So looking at what Aristotle said about what kind of good is happiness, it is easy to say that happiness is the chief end of man and the first principle of politics, but it is harder to say what happiness is. There are many views on the subject. Each person tends to form his idea of happiness from his personal experience of life. That can also relate to our idea of happiness in the creative process, which we'll get through soon. Most people, for example, think that wealth, possessions, honour or health constitute to the happiness of mankind. Aristotle says they cannot, for each one can be shown to be for the sake of another good. He suggests we turn to the whys for an answer and look at what various philosophers have said the good means. So to turn that into what is your good in the creative process is the why are you creating. Looking at happiness and creativity, some questions to keep in mind for yourself throughout. When have you found happiness in creativity? What has happened for that happiness to decrease during creativity? And how do you feel after a creative work session? This can be any artistic field, it's not limited to music. It can also be from sport, exercise. Again, can be related to many aspects of life. But one thing that we can take into the creative process from that mindset is, do you yourself create better when you're happy and carefree, or under stress, pressure, deadlines, or sadness? Implementing some of that advice in the sporting realm from New York Knicks legendary broadcaster and NBA champion Walt Frazier. We can also relate what he's described in the sporting term into the way that we look at our music or our creativity. That is, there are 3 types of players or 3 types of artists. Those that make things happen, those that watch things happen, and those that wonder what just happened. Now, looking at those 3 aspects can be definitely related to your industry. Are you making things happen in your industry and with your creative work? Are you just a bystander that watches and observes or listens to others perform their craft? Or are you looking back in the mirror going, geez, I was on the way up, now what's happened? That's what we want to try and avoid as the third, and make more of making things happen. Now we get to the creative process. In James Taylor's 5 steps of the creative process, 5 steps are presented which contribute to creative work. These are preparation, incubation, insight, evaluation, and elaboration. By being aware of these steps when going into a project, whether solo or collaborative, we can help work on the efficiency of our time and ensure we stay true to our pre-established goals. To provide a quick summary of these 5 stages, first we have the preparation stage, which I'll actually provide a real-world Ableton template example a little bit later to show how we can speed up that process. Then we have the incubation stage, where stuff goes to the back of the minds and subconsciously that just churns. Then we have the insight stage, which is the aha or the eureka moments. This is followed by the evaluation stage, the sitting back, the evaluating whether it's worth pursuing or not, and then finally the elaboration stage, doing the work, the implementation. This is getting on with doing it, whilst also testing and micro-testing the work itself and getting feedback on your ideas as well. And yes, we have the 4 F's of flow, but before we get to them, we'll look into the concept of flow and how flow works in creativity, because that is where the happiness comes when we are in the flow and the magic appears. If you've ever experienced flow, when we are in the zone, we want to harness that mindset and energy, especially when in a creative process like music production. By exploring the flow state in creativity, we can prepare our tangible and physical tools to help provide the best environment to reach our individual, optimal experiences in our artistic creation to reach that magical flow state. The 4 F's of flow are focus, freedom, feedback, and the 4% challenge. That is the right level of having the right level of focus, having a nice level of relaxed and freedom, no stresses, to be able to work freely without external stresses. Obviously garnering feedback internally and externally, and then the 4% challenge, doing something just a little bit harder each time that puts you out of that comfort zone, that challenges you creatively and with your work. Mihai's research into flow has determined that when a person can organise his or her consciousness so as to experience flow as often as possible, the quality of life starts to improve. Everything we experience is represented in the mind as information. If we are able to connect this information, we can determine what our lives will be like. Optimal flow states result when there is order in consciousness. This happens when we are focused on realistic goals with our skills matching the opportunities for action. Goals allow people to concentrate. By focusing on the benefits of the flow state and how this can maximize the quality of a positive creative performance based on preparation, we can analyze how one maintains their positive mental state and focus throughout their production experience. Charles Walker from St. Bonaventure University performed a series of experiments to determine if experiencing flow is better together or alone. He concluded that solitary flow, while quite enjoyable, is not as enjoyable as social flow. That'll lead us into the value of collaboration a little bit later. But if you list any great musician, there is no doubt a vast catalogue of collaborative efforts throughout their career. Even solo artists have solid teams around them. Goals allow people's attention on the task at hand, forgetting other things temporarily, was Walker's results. Goals, flow, collaboration, and creative consciousness will be reflected on and referred to throughout this lecture. But as you can see there's also the 8 characteristics of flow, which we've gone into a little bit more detail, which is the complete concentration of the task, the clarity of goals and reward in mind, and the immediate feedback, the transformation of time, either speeding up or slowing down in the process. The experience itself is intrinsically rewarding. There's an effortlessness and ease when we're in the flow state. There is a balance between challenge and skills, and that we're not doing something too easy, not too hard. There's the actions and awareness emerged, losing self-consciousness in the rumination, and we're definitely feeling in control of the task. Here we can see a graph with the concept of flow and how flow is experienced when one's skill level and difficulty of the challenge loosely match. Those with greater skills are likely to experience flow on the task of greater difficulty than those with poorer skills. Getting that perfect match is what inspires flow. Something that's fun, enjoyable, gives you a little bit of stress. It's not going to bore you, but it's going to motivate you. You're energized and you feel like you're growing because of that 4% challenge. And here's the man who wrote the book, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi.
In our studies, we represent the everyday life of people in this simple scheme, and we can measure this very precisely, actually, because we give people electronic pages that go off 10 times a day, and whenever they go off, you say what you're doing, how you feel, where you are, what you're thinking about. And two things that we measure is the amount of challenge people experience at that moment and the amount of skills that they feel they have at that moment. So for each person, we can establish an average, which is the center of the diagram. That would be your mean level of challenge and skill, which will be different from that of anybody else, but you have a kind of a set point there, which would be in the middle. If we know what that set point is, we can predict fairly accurately when you will be in flow, and it will be when your challenges are higher than average and skills are higher than average. And you may be doing things very differently from other people, but for everyone, that flow channel, that area there, will be when you're doing what you really like to do. Play the piano, probably. Be with your best friend. Perhaps work, if work is what provides flow for you.
We can see that flow is important, and as with Aristotle's definition of happiness, if we can establish happiness in creativity, we're more likely to have that sense of freedom, which is going to have a positive impact on the brain, which boosts confidence and will come through in our work. Now, implementing what we've just learned from flow and keeping focus and concentration on the task at hand with clarity of the goals and my reward in mind, here we look at my biggest inspirations in the electronic music industry. These are those that I've studied the most over the past 7 years and that have inspired me to make and create this for you as well as my musical works. What I learned from each of them, up in the top left corner we've got Pharrell and Chad, the importance of copyright, how instruments resonate with parts of the body to make us feel like the snap of a snare and not in your head. With producer Rick Rubin in the top right there with the Dixie Chicks, how to be malleable, relaxed and open to all genres, let the artists be themselves, and how we can integrate and benefit each other. With Timbaland, I learned that you don't need to be musically trained to make chart-topping tracks that make people dance, as he just gets in the studio and he will just pop what he thinks is a rhythm and lay it over the top. And Dinox and Beckers, I learned the structure, the balance, and that know the rules so you know how and why you can bend them. And also the preparation they put in, which you'll see in a minute. But the important thing here, and the common theme with all of these people, is collaboration. They are always collaborating in their musical endeavours. In group creativity and musical performance and collaboration, R. Keith Sawyer focuses on 3 defining characteristics of group creativity: improvisation, collaboration, and emergence. Several examples of these are demonstrated in group creativity in both music and theatre. By exploring how structure and improvisation are both always present in group creativity, we'll expand on this thinking from collaborative sessions to ensure we contain elements of structure as well as experimentation. From this, we examine on how this balance contributes to success and make recommendations on how artists can implement this into their own success. Throughout history, music has been one of the most powerful forms of culture and identity expression. Typically, not the product of an individual mind, but the result of a collaborative effort involving people with diverse backgrounds and behaviours. One can strongly hypothesise that structuring the rehearsal time as a constant back and forth of small musical interludes and conversation about the piece would be the most fertile ground for creative ideas to grow. Once the music playing interludes become longer but less frequent, the chance for feedback, experimentation, and demonstration diminishes. In the case of a team, one of the partners may be musically creative, with the other being a sounding board, the big picture person, or the business brains. An example is a case study I explored with German hypnotic melodic techno producers Dinox and Beckers. As Frank Beckers has the classical musically trained background, whereas Christian Dinox Wetterkind brings his career as a DJ performing in front of live crowds and how the feel and structure of a track appeals to DJs and to the audience. Denox and Beckers have been a regular at headlining festivals such as Rainbow Serpent, Maitreya, and Azora around the world. Through this research, we uncovered how the pandemic affected their impact on their electronic music production and the industry in general when it came to collaborating opportunities across the world. The restrictions of the pandemic limited travel and therefore collaborations in person with the artists and the producers. They found new digital methods to share ideas and utilise one another without tour dates to lock themselves in the studio and maximise this newfound time in creative works that may otherwise have been more time restricted. This time created an extra sense of creative freedom and allowed them to enter the flow state. One beneficiary during this time is also the music education sector, with an increase in masterclasses, as the growth of digital software such as Zoom and OBS provided artists such as Denox and Beckers and Oliver Koletsky, whose income from touring had been depleted, an opportunity to create video tutorials and sample packs with the ability to stream classes to dozens of aspiring producers and students across the world in real time. While distance learning has its advantages, for example, digitally taking students into the studios of their teachers and idols, it also presents challenges for students. For example, distance learning is that students can experience psychological issues while trying to learn online from home. For example, some students might feel more isolated while receiving their instruction at home away from their classmates. It is through case studies and educational sessions that indicate a shift in the traditional role of the artist as the digital age has a paradigm shift in the music economy, from recording, selling and touring to cultural entrepreneurship. Even prior to the pandemic, an increase in streaming services and digital distribution led to the music artist increasing their range of strategies to generate revenue through technology. The Dublin Business School conducted a survey with 48 participants into digital marketing tools used by rising dance music producers. 90% were males, 50% had an electronic dance music career of 1 to 5 years, 70% had 5 years in the industry. The most common forms for reaching an audience were 47% through social media, which ties back to what we heard from Julie earlier on. Instagram and Facebook were the most preferred platforms, and 37% came through online streaming with Spotify, YouTube and SoundCloud, the most popular services. In this new digital age, there is more than social media and streaming services that can help an artist engage with an audience, especially with the emergence of a new way of learning through the growth of home studios and music schools and the affordability of online music education. We find that communities named after their leading artists rise and fall over time, synchronising with fashion trends, distinctively highlighting how new artist communities form and old ones fade away. These temporal trends are in agreement with recent findings on changes in fashion cycles and the roles of the elite in their industries and cycles. A February 2020 study into music communities, mentorships and networks investigated the links between individual success and collaboration, analysing patterns of popular release data for electronic music artists appearing in the top rankings for DJ Magazine. Their results provide insights into the intertwined roles of success and collaboration in music, highlighting the landscape of artistic elites in the electronic music industry. During the 22-year history of the magazine, 500 DJs have made the top 100, yet between 1997 and 2018, 11 different DJs were crowned number one in the world. 168 made the top 100 once, and only 99 made it twice. Associating popularity rankings with success in music is not only a potential route to understand the rank dynamics of the most successful individuals, but it also has a long-standing reputation in the music industry. Whilst there seems to be a stranglehold at the top of the chain for elite artists, their collaboration tree is endless, and the mentees are the core of what supports the growth in the electronic music industry. This reflects also on the impact Australian producers had with those international collaborators during the pandemic time, with genre elites affected by the travel restrictions. Festivals such as Rainbow Serpent Festival, whilst not featuring the appeal of a top 100 DJ, by observing their annual set times and calendars, we saw that trends in repeated international headline acts, as well as growth of local artists based on the value of the set time and stage for which they are placed, and in some cases, as simple as the font size on the poster. Here we were analysing the emergence and success of the electronic music industry and how the elites collaborate with the emerging to continue to grow the brand and the industry that is electronic music. A 2019 study into music sampling traditions in the digital age explored the delocalization of geographic proximity, delocalization of communities by the internet, finding collaboration remains a key transmission mode of music sampling traditions. This research showed the development of online collaboration as it was published prior to the travel restrictions, which hampered artists and performers throughout, which suggested that less in-person collaboration was becoming a natural progression regardless of the pandemic. But the pandemic itself just helped speed up the process by having these music schools and tutorial sessions through things like Zoom and OBS sped up. Electronic dance music producers now have more competition than ever, but also more platforms to collaborate with their peers. There's more opportunities to learn and share content with their idols and their teachers online, and more mediums to stand out and engage with an audience, in an industry that was previously dictated by clicky record labels. The shift in the way consumers experience music is definitely a benefit to those collaborating in the emerging digital age of electronic music. Now, the point of this entire presentation is to help us make money doing our creative art. But also, let's just go back to Mr. Rubin for his advice on how we can make money pursuing our art.
The thing for you, the audience, and it doesn't really matter what anyone else thinks. And if you have to get a job to support yourself so that you can make your art, that's fine. You can't make art for someone else. You can't make art with someone else in mind. I don't believe it can be good.
Whilst our dream and intention is to have art to be our primary and hopefully flourishing source of income, we must be realistic in the early stages of our career to ensure we do not sacrifice our creative goals in the name of financial comfort. How are we going to support ourselves? And in a way that helps us build our network and brand that can help in turn further our career as an artist. Now let's look at some of those different revenue streams that are available to us in the music business. Basically, what I'm exploring here is ways to financially support yourself whilst keeping true to your art and further your career goals as an artist in your chosen field. Through my research, I've investigated revenue streams related to artists in this digital age, so the artist, or in our case, electronic dance music producer, can further their career whilst also having an income from a job in the music production or relative to the music industry that supports their career pursuits. Revenue streams that support creative endeavours have evolved from the era of records to cassettes, CDs, MP3 players, and now into online streaming. So here we have a look at traditional and modern revenue streams in the music industry that we can use as our art as a stable source of income as the entertainment industry evolves. For the creatives watching this that aren't musicians, perhaps have a think about what are some examples in your industry that can help you find a stable income that's relative to your passion, but not the creative work itself. Looking at traditional revenue streams for a music producer, obviously we have music sales, that's the most traditional method, your CDs, your tapes. Now it's more applicable to online platforms such as Spotify, Bandcamp, iTunes, Beatport, etc. There's obviously the traditional touring, your performances, your gigs, whether it's clubs, festivals, events, radio or TV, earning revenue through appearance fees, or getting a percentage of ticket sales for the events you are performing at. Merchandise sales, obviously, t-shirts, hats, whatever it might be, stickers. These can even be packaged with the digital music purchases, and a lot of people have online shops these days. Similar to that is sponsorship and endorsements, brand partnerships, influencing or sponsorships for ads, or certain product placements, or even gear and products. You can also get royalties from performance organisations, such as by being registered with APRA. Artists can collect royalties when the music is played in public venues or at sporting events, or again with TV commercials or in movie or theatre. There's sync licensing, which is similar to the above, but more specific for video games, movies, and commercials. And there's also collaborating and co-writing, which you touched on a little bit earlier, but basically sharing revenue with other artists when you work together. But we won't just take Rick Rubin's word for it. Let's see what our old mate Pharrell has to say about alternate revenue streams before we move into modern revenue streams in the emerging digital age.
Find something that you love to do, something that you would do for free just because you were happy to be there. Like you'd be happy to be an intern. Number two, try to find like a vocation connected to it. Do whatever it takes. Find a vocation that is connected to something that you love so much that you would show up for free. Number 3, if you can find a way to service humanity as well with that job, well, now you have a dream job that you wake up every day and feel like you get paid for free, and you are also contributing to karma, good karma or goodwill. Like, that's the reason why you start a business, if you're going to start one.
Thanks to the internet, we now have access to $1 billion industry with millions of users at the tip of our fingers. It's now possible for anyone to produce a quality record without extremely expensive equipment. But to succeed in all this, one must understand the principles of online music marketing and apply them correctly. Electronic dance music producers now have more revenue streams than ever before. Some are more traditional in alignment with musicians from other genres from previous decades, for example, music stores. And then there's also more modern streams which have emerged in the digital age, like streaming. The traditional streams, which are still relevant and the core of this industry today, are what we saw in the previous PowerPoint. Your sales, your gigs and touring, your sponsorships, your merch, your collabs and co-writing. Modern streams are subscription sales, which offer service-based content like the aforementioned tutorials, masterclasses, or paid access to a private online community such as Patreon. There's remixing and ghost production, which is producing tracks for other artists anonymously. There's sample pack sales, which we touched on before, where you create and sell samples of your music or sounds or presets that you've created, and create sound libraries for digital audio workstations such as Ableton or Pro Tools. These can be a valuable revenue stream, particularly if you're in a niche genre or have unique hardware equipment in your studio that's hard to create in the box. There's also crowdfunding. Projects, albums and tours can be crowdfunded by utilising sites, again, such as Patreon or Kickstarter. There's teaching and workshops. We saw Denox and Becker's as an example during tutorials or live one-on-one lessons and workshops, again, especially if you're in a niche genre or have a certain level of expertise. Music licensing for businesses, again, that's still a more modern one, coming into your restaurants, your hotels, your retail stores, perhaps making something specific for them to help the consumer attitude based on the atmosphere in the venue. And finally, perhaps the main source for dance music producers in establishing their path and building their brand into success in the industry online is through streaming royalties. Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, Bandcamp, they are now the home of where this music is consumed, and have taken place of the compact disc or the tape sales. The former physical medium used to be how the artist's success was measured, and their sales, now it's done through the streaming services, and this includes work being sampled by other artists. There are other modern ways to earn an income within the industry that keeps one developing skills and learning all facets of the music business beyond just the creative process in studio, but it also helps keep one relevant and networking with those who will also help expose and share your creative art. By committing our time into these alternate revenue streams, it will help fulfill our purpose mentioned earlier about making things happen and won't feel like we are sacrificing our time or morals. Or to quote Dave Chappelle, we are all staying in our lane. So to summarise, by utilising your strengths in the digital medium, this can be applied to add credibility to your brand, which will help growth and exposure of your creative products and your own personal development, and penning your goals can help your creative work be ready to be sold or taken on tour. Now let's have a look at an example of one of those revenue streams for electronic music artists as we look into sample packs and preset packs. This shows you here how sample packs look on a website, bundling them up there, and they can go from anywhere from $40 to $500 plus US. So depending on the depth of the pack and if it's presets or just sounds. Similar with the presets there on the right, which is basically when you're within a plugin itself. When you're messing around, if you don't like a sound, that's okay, but just make sure you save it, because then someone else might like it, or you might want to use it again in the future, and you can monetize that. But at the end of the day, we want to create for ourselves. Okay, so now we're going to look at some of the Ableton tips that I spoke to you about. This gets back to that preparation and the 5 Ps of the perfect planning prevents poor performance, or as one of my bosses used to say, the 7 Ps, which it's perfect planning and practice prevent piss poor performance. So either way, being well prepared and practicing, we
expect that we can enter the flow state and enjoy the creative process more happily.
This comes back to also working in collaboration, because you don't want someone to come into your studio and see your setup and it be messy or poor naming and things like that. So we'll quickly go through how to set up an Ableton session. This can work with any creative industry, whatever your default canvas is, whether it's art, whether it's Premiere Pro, you know your settings that you are most likely going to want to keep using, and it's a matter of setting that up from the start. So this is how Ableton would look. Now let's listen to D. Knox and Beckers. This is from their masterclass.
Before we start to get creative, we need to open our preferences and also work on our default settings.
Exactly. So in Ableton, here you see the default full screen of Ableton, and this is pretty much how it comes when you buy it, the default template. And yeah, we want to talk about some adjustments here and there. So as you said, we're first gonna open the preferences. It's here under Live Preferences.
Okay, so you get to the preferences there, and that's going to be based on whatever your operating system is as far as to what speakers and that show up there. But going through there, you can set up many of your basic settings like your warp features, little intricacies that are going to save you time in the future. I'll explain them clearer here. So basically, you've got a good session and a bad session. So here's an example. You have your sends and returns with Ableton at the bottom. You've got your tracks at the top. So you've got reverb and delay. So the default delay here is 21% feedback with 3 on the left and a delay of 3 beats on the right. But that's something that you can customize yourself. So looking here, this is how a track is supposed to look at the end. This is an album made with a dozen different songs. You see they're all named, they're all color coded nicely. So little things like color coding and naming convention goes a very, very long way to professionalism, but also by having templates built and doing this right at the start, when you do get that spark of creativity and want to get in that flow state quicker, you won't be bogged down by going through the nitty gritty of setting up a session. So here's what a session can look like as you're getting into it. You can see big blocks there for the kick and the bass, like, you know, the orange there. Everything's color coded. Some are the same, so it's not quite right. And you can see some of the arrangement at the bottom where some of those crashes and hats just have their one-shot hits. Whereas things at the top there, the stems with the bass and the kick that are going to be more of a constant throughout. And you can see there with the grouping as well on the side. So you've got your kick and your bass grouped together, because you know you're probably going to automate something to filter out the high end with those together. So that's why you group them. Same with your drum rack. You know that when you're going to filter out the drums, it's probably going to be all together. But also, you know, when you're working on that particular instrument chain, that you've got them all grouped nicely. And then if you want to just turn off the drums and listen to your synth, you can just do that with one easy click. This is how the session template looks when you start.
Okay, so here we are recording Ableton. This is a new session. I do have mine in dark mode, which is why the colors might be a little bit different. But when you open a session, here's how an audio file appears. You can see down the bottom there's no effects. Now I've got mine set up. If I right click or go Command T, then that will install an audio track, and you can see that I've already got this effects channel set up, but I want it as one of my defaults. But now I want to make just a couple of basic changes. For example, I know that with nearly all instruments, I'm going to want it cut below 40 Hertz because it won't really play below that on the system. And then we want to cut above about 18,000 because we don't hear above 20. So we'll make it about there, about 19.5. That's good. Now here I've got another, so this is the subtractive EQ, and then this one is the additive. So if there's a part in the drum that we like that we want to highlight, we can boost it there, knowing that we've already taken it away over here. And then also the compressor, which I know that I like to use the compressor. I got this from the D. Knox and Beckers masterclass. You set up a side chain, you have the ratio high, the attack low, and the RMS keeps it smooth. And now I like how all that is, and I want that to be the case for all of my new tracks going forward. So we hold shift and we just click there, click the group there as well, and it brings up the areas we like. And now with that, we right click on the audio channel, click save as default audio track. Do we want to overwrite the previous? Yes. And now when we go to right click and insert a new audio track, look at that. The new one's got the fresh 40 cut off at the bottom, 19.5, and our little boost and our compressor settings there. So you can do that same with the overall template by clicking save template as well, and that'll save your entire thing there just as generic for the sake of that. But then also if we want to load one of those templates, like my techno template I've got, here's one here. Click on that, let it load, and you can see all the different effects I've already got set up at the bottom right here. I've got the track titles names as we zoom out, and this one's got just a little bit of an indication of where I might like a pad to land or a cowbell to play, for example. All right, let's move on.
Here's an example of how of that save template. So without all the obviously audio in there, but so if we get a spark and I have someone come over for a new session, bada bing, it's ready to go. We know that that's going to be the arrangement, and we've already got our track script. Here's another example of it now with the actual arrangement with the audio in the place for where they would actually sit in the track. So you can see there, as opposed to the earlier slides where it was one big block, we've deleted that out. So it's a lot neater, a lot easier to look at, so you know what's coming as it moves across the timeline. Here's an example of what not to do. If you can tell me what's wrong with this. Obviously, it's all green. If you look down the side, half of the tracks are called audio. Juno Bells gives us a little bit of info, but if you had someone to come in, let's say you just had an artist that was touring from Germany, says he wants to make a track with you, what have you been working on? Comes back after a gig, which happens many times, particularly in Melbourne. You open something like that, and automatically they're going to be turned away. If we saw what was back on the previous slide, where it looks all nice and neat, then obviously that is a very different kettle of fish. Here's the next level of that looking all nice and neat with the automation. So automation is where your EQs and your filtering is coming in and out, or you might have a channel turning on and off. You might know that every time you make a track, you don't want the bass to come in until the 33rd bar. So you've got that sitting high there, off, and then it comes on when it wants to, so you get that hit of the first drop. Same with effects going in and out of breaks. You might know where you like your build-ups, and that's where across the top here, by labeling and having the names across the top for where you're going to introduce certain instruments like a hi-hat or an off-hat or the kick and the bass or the synth, that's where just little things like that will make your job so much easier when you get stuck in the vortex of creativity. Okay, so basically that's it. I appreciate everything that you've sat through. There's quite a bit there. It was a bit nerdy at the end for the audio guys, but again, the purpose of this is to have the student, the listener, the audience reflect on their own creativity and get some inspiration and some awareness into how they're working and how they can improve their own creative process so they can make better art and be more productive in their own time, basically. So that's why we explored collaboration. We looked into the creative process itself, and then it's not just about the art, it's also about trying to make a bit of money out of it. And we all like being in the flow state and being happy while we're doing it, because after all, that's why we do it, because we love it. You'll be able to see more of this on my website and YouTube channels.
For those that liked what they've seen, here's some reference and reading for you.
But yeah, overall, thank you very much for your time, and hopefully you got something out of this and you took lots of notes. So let's see those notes and here's some questions. Thank you.